Microsoft's artificial intelligence news, 7 strategies for ERP implementation success, and trends in manufacturing and supply chain management. Those are just a few of the topics we're going to cover here in episode 165 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. This podcast features technology agnostic and international discussions related to digital strategy, software selection, implementation, change management, business process optimization, and everything else you need to know to make your digital transformation project successful. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 165. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach their third stage of digital transformation success. We help clients with digital strategy, software selection, implementation planning, as well as implementation itself. So if you'd like to learn more about us, you can go to thirdstage-consulting.com, and Third Stage Consulting is the sponsor of today's podcast and of this podcast in general. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions. You can find new episodes every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. And we've got a great lineup of guests coming up, not only here today, but in coming weeks. We've got just some amazing guests here from the industry. We've got clients, we've got consultants, we've got other vendors, industry peers, that sort of thing. So be sure to stay tuned every week. You can go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to keep up to date, as well as to see past episodes of the show on whichever platform you prefer. Got a great show for you today. We're going to cover a few things to start off. We're going to get into our opening segment where we get into some audience questions from YouTube. We've gotten a lot of really good questions recently here in the last few days on my YouTube channel, so we're going to address some of those questions. We're going to get into some new news with Microsoft's AI initiatives. We're also going to get into the Bank of America cybersecurity breach, which is something that actually happened late last year, but what's really interesting about it, other than its newsworthiness and its timeliness, is just the implications for digital transformations in cybersecurity and cybersecurity concerns and considerations as you go through digital transformations. I think there's some good lessons here from the Bank of America cybersecurity breach that we'll talk about. And then later in the show, we'll have our first guest, who is Greg Benton, who is our Chief Strategy Officer here at Third Stage Consulting. He and I are going to chat with the audience about the top 7 strategies to ensure ERP implementation success, or another way to look at it would be how to ensure that you don't fail in your ERP implementation. So depending on which whether you're a glass half full or a glass half empty type of person, we'll cover the strategies that you need to know for your ERP implementation. And then later in the show, we're going to play you a clip of a conference that I spoke at several months ago, but we're just now getting the video footage to be able to play for you here in today's podcast. But it's a panel discussion at a large ERP vendor conference where myself and 3 other panelists who are from industry, who are in manufacturing and supply chain, the 3 or 4 of us are going to talk about trends in manufacturing and supply chain management, particularly as it relates to ERP implementations and digital transformation. So be sure to stick around for that. It's a really good conversation and one that I enjoyed very much, so I'm excited to share that with you. So before we get to that, though, let's get to some of the audience questions here today. And we actually have several really interesting questions that we've gathered here this week or over the last few days here on YouTube. And this first video, or this first question, I should say, is from a video that I posted recently that is called, "What are the most important business processes to document during digital transformation?" And in that video, I talk about how you can separate your business processes and bifurcate them into 2 categories. One category would be those business processes that are unique differentiators to you as a business. It's your source of competitive advantage. It's sort of those deal breakers, those things you have to have and you have to do well to be successful as an organization. That's one bucket. The other bucket is those more vanilla business process areas, things that maybe are not areas of competitive differentiation, areas that you're more flexible and willing to compromise on whatever the software can or can't do. And you treat those processes differently because you're going to spend more time engineering and re-engineering your processes that are differentiators, and maybe a little less time re-engineering your processes related to some of the more commodity-based processes. So that's the whole premise of the video, and I sort of explain how to identify which business processes fit into which bucket for your organization. And so one question we got here from Christopher Demzuk, and I may be mispronouncing the name. It's highly likely I'm mispronouncing the name. But Christopher says, what about personalized processes in the AP and AR, which is accounts payable and accounts receivable modules, which you say are not critical? And he is correct. In the video, I use as an example accounts payable and how for most organizations, paying vendors faster is not a source of competitive differentiation. So in those cases, it's not that you don't want to pay any attention to those processes, but you might be more inclined just to accept whatever the software can do that you're deploying rather than trying to re-engineer or recreate, a new way of doing things. So what Christopher's saying is, but what about personalized processes in the AP and AR modules, which you say are not critical? I'm not a fan of the finance modules, but in my current project, I've encountered myself with personalized procedures for approvals and control of payments for AP and personalized credit management for AR. This process ended up being part of the company's policies and a big issue in the project. Ultimately, these ones required customizations in our JD Edwards implementation. I think this business case may be an exception according to your rule. This company doesn't have a process or audit department, but if they have, surely this policy would fall under scope. So maybe check the audit policies first can be another check before deciding which processes are important to map. He brings up a really good point here. And when you're dealing with finance, and the risk of me using finance as an example of something that maybe is not a competitive differentiator or one that you don't need to spend a lot of time mapping out, that's obviously not going to be a true statement for a company that is in, for example, financial services. If you're a banking institution, then your financial and accounting processes are going to be a lot more important than a manufacturing organization that is looking at its AP processes, its accounts payable. So you have to look at the context of your business and obviously understand not only what's important to your business, depending on what industry you're in, but also what are those regulatory concerns too. If you're operating in a country where there's certain regulatory requirements you have and you don't have the right controls in place as it is, or even if you do have controls in place with your legacy software, you obviously have to make sure that you really understand and focus on those regulatory controls and make sure that you implement that as part of your new project. So in that case, I would agree that yes, absolutely. If that's a critical need for your business, or if it's a regulatory concern or regulatory thing that you have to comply with, then of course you want to make sure that you do spend time defining those needs and those processes so that you roll out technology that can conform to that. So great clarifying point, because again, in my video, I use accounts payable as an example of a process that may not be important to all organizations, but to some organizations, it could be very important. And accounts receivable, this person mentions accounts receivable. Accounts receivable is very important to a lot of organizations because they want to collect money faster. It helps with cash flow. It helps with growth, all that good stuff. So I would agree that accounts receivable is probably going to be even more important than accounts payable for a lot of organizations. So very good point. I appreciate this person, Christopher, bringing up that point. Another question here. Actually, I've got two questions here I'm going to cover that are related to a video that I published recently on my YouTube channel that is called "Who is to Blame for Digital Transformation and ERP Implementation Failures?" And in that video, I talk about how basically there's a lot of blame to go around when there's challenges with projects or when a project fails. And usually it's not just one person or one party within a project team that is the main contributor of failure. It's usually a combination of a bunch of different people and decisions that were made. And so this person, Mary Buta, I believe it is, on YouTube says, I've worked as a change management consultant for 10 plus years and is also PMP certified. And unfortunately, either one, OCM doesn't get fully recognized and gets relegated to the back seat, or two, change management does get recognized and given critical responsibilities on a given implementation, only to be positioned as a scapegoat if and when there's an issue down the road. 9 times out of 10, it's the PMs who are the most vocal about blaming the change management team. Program or project managers are in the hot seat throughout the project and see change management as an easy target, as it takes a very experienced change management person to push back without hindering the project management and change management partnership. So really good point there, and I agree with you. I think change management does get blamed often for implementation failures, and I also think that change management is often put in the back seat or relegated to the back seat, as Mary says here. And very good points. And I think that, she closes out, by the way, this is a very long comment, but the statement she says that she closes out with is change management as a discipline has become more and more unfulfilling, partly because of the above, but that's just the tip of the iceberg, unfortunately. And, I think this is a really good point and something that's unspoken. I don't even talk about it that much, if ever, on my YouTube videos or on this podcast, but that is that change management it's a really tough job, and it can be discouraging for change management practitioners, especially if you humor me for a moment and allow me to stereotype change management people, change management consultants. People that are change management types generally are very optimistic, and they want to help people, and they want to do the right thing. They want to ease people's minds, and there's sort of a very deep-seated want to help. I think that's true for a lot of consultants, but I think it's especially true for change management consultants and change management team members, is they're there to help, and they want to see the good in this project, even more so than the average project team member. And so it can be very discouraging when you start to get blamed for things, or suddenly people don't recognize the value of what you're doing. It can be even harder for a change management person, as a broad generalization. And so I think it's important to recognize that part of the reason why change management teams have a bullseye on them oftentimes, and why they oftentimes get blamed for project failure, is because inevitably every project is going to have resistance to change. People will resist the project. And unfortunately for change management types and change management project team members, there's only so much they can control. For example, if a project doesn't have a clear direction, and the executives aren't bought into the project, and they're not supportive of the project, and they're not making the decisions they need to make in a timely manner, that's going to cause resistance to change, and it's going to create a bigger problem for the change management team to have to deal with. And the change management team can't always influence or change the realities of what's happening. Now, of course, there's executive level types of things you can and should do as a change management team member, but that only works if the executive team is willing to collaborate and willing to be part of the solution. And so you really have to recognize that, and I hate to say it that way, or I hate to suggest that there's nothing you can do about it, because there are things you can do about it, but it does make change management a very difficult discipline, in my opinion, for those reasons. Because A, you're going to have resistance to change no matter what, and there's a certain amount of likelihood that you'll get blamed for it if you're part of the change management team, because you didn't fix it, or you didn't fix it fast enough, or you didn't see it coming, or whatever the case may be. At least that's the perception. I'm not saying it's true, but that could be the perception within your organization. Or even worse, the project team or executive leadership decides that change management isn't important, we're not going to invest in it. Or what's, I would say, even worse than that is we're going to sort of invest in it. We're going to put a person in that role, but that person isn't going to be equipped or have the bandwidth or the capacity to be able to address all the change management needs that the project has, and so they're set up to fail. And that can be very discouraging for anyone, but especially, like I said, a change management person who really does want to help and does want to make people's lives better as part of the transformation. So really good point, Mary. I don't know that I have a good solution to that, other than you have to get to and start with the top of the organization. And if you could do that and then work your way down to the project leadership and then the project team, and then, of course, from there, all your subject matter experts and your frontline employees that are going to be affected by the project, you have to be able to work your way down the food chain, or down the hierarchy, if you will, from a change management perspective. You can't just come in and help the lower level people with their change initiatives or their change needs without addressing the higher levels of the organization. In order to address the higher levels of the organization, though, you need their commitment to those higher levels, that they recognize the need for it and are willing to be a part of it and participate in it as well. So very, very good points there. And then the last comment which is actually from that same video, from Who's to Blame for Digital Transformation in ERP Implementation Failures. By the way, if you just go to my YouTube channel and if you're scrolling through the thumbnails, the thumbnail says Digital Transformation Blame Game. So it's one of the more recent videos that you'll see at the time we're publishing this podcast. So this comment is from YouTube as well, and it says, good points. I think the implementation partners get the projects with often a stringent timeline, and the team then delivers, but where most gaps can be created just to deliver on time. I think even the client should think about having their own dedicated team full-time on a project, which will increase the success rate. So two really important points in that comment here on YouTube. One is that oftentimes the implementation partner is trying to meet some sort of unrealistic timeline to begin with. And quite frankly, oftentimes it was that same implementation partner that convinced the implementing organization that was a realistic timeline when in fact it wasn't. So then the delivery team comes in, and now they've got to make some bad decisions and some shortcuts to be able to meet that time frame, which typically leads to more problems, which typically leads to more delays and project budget overruns, troubled go lives, all that stuff downstream. So that's one problem. And then the other problem that this person points out is that clients should have their dedicated project team. And I totally agree with that. If you don't have your team ready and you haven't mobilized the team from your internal resources, then I would not move forward with bringing in the technical consultants until you have your team in place. You can do other planning stuff, and you can do some sort of pre-implementation work that can be very helpful and high value, but I would wait to bring in that army of technical consultants before or until after you have your own project team fully identified and fully committed to the project. Only at that point would I then bring in the implementation partners. Now, the implementation partners, the technical implementation partners, the software vendors, the system integrators, the technical resellers, whatever they're called for your project, they're going to try to convince you that, hey, let's get started now. Let's bring on our team now to get started. But you really have to resist that, because you want your team to be ready to go, and you want to be on even footing with the software vendor. You don't want to have them come in and steamroll you because you don't have the team in place from your employee base. So good stuff there, and thank you for that feedback there on YouTube. And lots of good questions here, and we don't get to all of them, but any questions you have on any of the social media platforms, whether it's my LinkedIn page or my YouTube channel, Twitter, Facebook, etc., be sure to leave those comments, and this is where we pull questions for every opening segment of our podcast. So be sure to ask those questions on social media, and we'll get to as many of those as we can in upcoming episodes. So speaking of this episode, we're going to shift gears and get to a couple of newsworthy items here in just a moment. We're going to talk about Microsoft's AI news, as well as the Bank of America cybersecurity breach that happened late last year. But more importantly, we're going to talk about what that means for digital transformations here today. And then later in the show, we'll have Greg Benton on the show, who's going to be here to chat about 7 strategies for ERP implementation success. And then last but not least, we will have a panel discussion with myself and 3 other manufacturing and supply chain types within the industry. They're going to be talking about trends in manufacturing and supply chain management, so be sure to stick around for that. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstage-consulting.com.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation, including the people, process, and technology sides of change. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also see past episodes of this podcast, all 164 past episodes, in fact, by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can listen or watch on whatever platform you would like by going to that website. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting Group, which is an independent consulting firm that helps clients with their digital transformation journeys. And it's not coincidentally the same company that I am the CEO of. So thank you for being here today and supporting Third Stage. A couple of newsworthy items we want to get to today. First is Microsoft has a couple of pieces of interesting news that have just been launched here in the last couple weeks. One is that Microsoft recently unveiled what it described as its first AI-powered Surface PC for business. It's called the Surface Pro 10 and the Surface Laptop 6, which has an Intel Core Ultra processor and neutral processing units that the company says will power advanced artificial intelligence applications and experiences. And on the surface, maybe this doesn't sound like a big deal because everyone's talking about AI. Every technology provider out there seems like they're talking about AI. Even in our industry, in consulting and services, people are talking about AI-powered service offerings and things like that. So it's obviously a very sexy, commonly used term nowadays over the last couple of years. But what's interesting about this is I think Microsoft, if you really sort of dig into this and think about this a little bit more, I think what it's doing is Microsoft is pretty smart with this AI-powered idea with the PCs being used for business and whatnot, because now it's sort of like taking the Internet of Thing concept, combining it with AI and data capture and algorithms and data analytics and things of that nature. And it's sort of combining the best of two trends or two opportunities within the technology space. For those of you that don't know, Internet of Things is the concept of really capturing data with all the different devices out there in the world. Like, for example, I'm wearing an Apple Watch right now, and this Apple Watch is a great example of Internet of Things because it's capturing all kinds of data about my heart rate, my activity level, even what I eat. I can track in my phone or with an app on my phone that ties to my watch. So the data captured here can be used in sort of an Internet of Things sort of concept where all this data can now be consolidated or aggregated by Apple, and Apple now can make meaning of all the data that they capture, not only from my watch, but from millions of other people that wear an Apple Watch. And the same can be said for manufacturing shop floors. You have all those robotics and all those machines out on a shop floor that are doing different things. Each of those machines is capturing data on the shop floor. The question becomes, well, what do we do with the data? And that's what AI can be used for now, is to sift through all these mass amounts of data as it relates to Internet of Things. And what Microsoft is doing here by infusing AI into the end device that's being used by businesses, and I assume at some point even the consumer level, what that's going to allow is it's going to allow Microsoft now to become a mass aggregator of mass amounts of data that can then be used in its own AI modules or its own AI models and data learning models to now make better decisions and become smarter. And really what we're doing with AI is we're trying to teach AI to become smarter and to make decisions like humans would and that sort of thing. And the best way to do that is with mass amounts of data. And that's why I always say that the companies that have the biggest advantage within the AI nuclear arms race is going to be those big tech companies that have mass amounts of scale, that can get mass amounts of data and train their AI models better than anyone else. So companies like Microsoft that are now capturing data at scale with not only these devices, these new devices they're rolling out, but their existing enterprise applications, their existing Office users, and think of all the different touch points that we all have with Microsoft products, whether we want to or not. Microsoft has a huge advantage now because they've got all this data that they can use to train their AI models. Same can be said for Apple, Google, Amazon Web Services. On the enterprise tech space, you look at SAP, Microsoft again with their Dynamics offering, Oracle Fusion, these big tech providers that have lots of big customers with lots of employees using their technology and capturing data along the way, those companies have a distinct advantage because data is the currency that is going to fuel mainstream adoption or further mainstream adoption of AI. And so by doing this here with their Surface Pro and Surface Laptop offerings, Microsoft is sort of getting in or sort of escalating their nuclear arms race to capture more data and to train and educate their AI models more than they already have. So I think it's a really interesting thing to watch out for and watch how more and more of these organizations try to really fuel their capture of data and really creating more intelligent AI models. And then along those same lines, sort of similar to that and related to Microsoft, is that Microsoft recently announced that they have a new chief executive of their new AI division. So they have a whole new AI division. They have a new chief executive that they hired from two AI startups or two past high-profile AI startups. I'm not familiar with this person, but the person is Mustafa Suleyman, who previously co-founded the AI startups called DeepMind and Inflection AI. And then Microsoft now, just recently, a couple weeks ago, hired Mustafa as the co-founder, or I'm sorry, as the chief executive of its new AI division. So obviously, Microsoft is becoming very serious about AI, both in terms of how they're structuring the organization, the leadership they're hiring, and now introducing AI to some of the end devices that they're rolling out to businesses and I suspect eventually end consumers as well. So very interesting stuff there. And then the last thing I'll talk about here today in sort of our newsworthy topics for discussion would be this Bank of America cybersecurity leak. Now, this actually happened back in, I think it was November of 2023. So it's a few months old, but recently, this is actually from Forbes. Forbes published an article talking about how Bank of America came out in February of 2023 and said that customers need to be aware that there was a cybersecurity breach. People might have access to sensitive information for their customers. And that in and of itself is newsworthy. But what's even more interesting is if you dive in and sort of look under the covers here of what this means to organizations in general, not just financial services organizations, but just organizations in general. We can see that there's some concerns here as more organizations start to automate their business and continue to automate their business, continue to move to new modern platforms, continue to move their data to cloud service providers. That comes with it a certain amount of lost control, whether you like it or not, or whether it's good or bad. But now someone else is housing the data, and now more data is being automated or captured in a central location. Now there's more of an opportunity to have mass breaches of data along with that. Now, you have to assume that on the surface, the average Amazon Web Service or Azure or any big hosting provider that is housing data from all these big, massive corporations and organizations throughout the world, you have to assume that their cybersecurity policies and the cybersecurity strength of those organizations is going to be a lot better than the average mom and pop IT organization is going to be able to do on their own. But at the same time, these big, massive organizations are going to be bigger targets from some more complex and more sophisticated hackers and cybersecurity attacker type people. And so that's the thing that I take away from this is that you get a Bank of America that's being targeted. And if they can't protect their data, what does that mean for the average small or mid-size or smaller organization that doesn't have the resources that Bank of America has to protect their data and their assets? And by the way, they have regulatory things that require them to have more protections in place than the average, say, a mid-sized manufacturer might. So this is really interesting because the information that was lost in the breach includes Social Security numbers, account numbers, date of birth, address, all that stuff. And this was actually as a result of, it says, I'll read you the quote rather than trying to paraphrase it. But the article says a November 2023 breach at IT consulting and service provider Infosys McCamish Systems has now been confirmed to have led to a data breach impacting Bank of America customers. So this is a third-party service provider that was providing hosting services for Bank of America. So it wasn't Bank of America itself that had the breach. It was actually their IT service provider called Infosys, which is a very large well-known IT consulting organization globally. And that's one thing. And so, some of the other things that this article goes on to mention is that, I'll just read you the quote here that says, while the benefits of these processes are clear, institutions are increasingly trusting third-party organizations with customer data. Cybersecurity is not just an in-house issue, but one dependent on a series of organizations from IT vendors and payment providers to cloud services and software platforms. Financial institutions and their partners must move beyond compliance and tick box exercises, fostering an active security consciousness that encourages positive security behaviors. So I think the key here is that it's not just your own systems and your own internal things you've got to think about. Now you've got to think about all these third-party providers that now have access to your data, and you have to wonder, how secure is your data and what happens if something happens to your data as a result of a breach at a third-party provider. And what further complicates this is not, most organizations don't just have one third-party service provider that houses all of their data. With the increasing adoption of cloud technologies and the mass adoption of cloud technologies, a lot of organizations have multiple cloud providers that are housing different parts of their business processes and different sets of data that is oftentimes being integrated to other cloud hosting providers. So, for example, if you had 10 cloud hosting providers because you're using 10 different cloud applications and those 10 systems are talking to one another, now you've got all of your data that's going back and forth between 10 different systems, and all it takes is one breach at one of those 10 providers, and that could expose the data that's being housed in from other cloud providers could be exposed there as well. So it's really something to think about, that you've got to look at this whole thing pretty holistically in terms of cybersecurity. And clearly, if Bank of America can't find a way to avoid security breaches with a third-party provider like Infosys, it makes you wonder, how much at risk are other organizations as well. So cybersecurity is obviously something that's going to continue to be really important with digital transformations and ERP projects as we move forward here. But some interesting news there from Bank of America. So good stuff there. We're going to shift gears and bring on our first guest here in just a moment. His name is Greg Benton. He's been on the show several times in the past. It's been a while. So it's, I think, the first time this year here in 2024 that we've had him on the podcast so far. So it'll be great to have him on here. Today, we're going to talk about 7 strategies for ERP implementation success, or AKA 7 strategies to avoid ERP implementation failure. So we're going to have Greg here on the show in just a moment, and then later we will have the panel discussion talking about trends in manufacturing and supply chain management. So be sure to stick around for that as well. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. My name is Kimberling, and I'm the CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to invite you to learn a little bit more about Third Stage Consulting, who we are and what we do. We help clients through their entire digital transformation life cycles, beginning with digital strategy, software evaluation and selection, all the way through and including implementation planning, implementation readiness, and the actual implementation itself. We're technology agnostic, so we only represent our clients' best interests. We do not represent software vendors. But having said that, we work very closely with software vendors, all the leading players that you can imagine we've worked with, both in helping clients evaluate and select them, but also in helping clients implement those solutions as well. So we have a very broad, objective, agnostic view of the market that is meant to really represent your interest as you go through your digital transformation. I also encourage you to scan this QR code right here to get access to our resource center. This resource center has a ton of information, ton of ebooks that are free. You have access to top 10 software rankings, playbooks for how to make your project more successful, guides to change management, YouTube videos, all kinds of stuff that are going to help you through your digital transformation. So I encourage you to scan this QR code to get access to those resources. And please feel free to reach out to me directly to brainstorm ideas about your project. Even if it's just informally, you want to bounce around some ideas and get some informal advice, I'd be happy to spend some time with you. So feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. You can also find it in the description field of this video as well.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
I
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 165. My name is Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also find past episodes of this show by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com as well. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is the company I work for. And then Third Stage is an independent, tech-agnostic consulting provider that helps clients through their digital transformation journeys. We have offices in North America, Europe, and Asia Pacific. So be sure to check us out, regardless of what part of the world you might be in here today. And I'm excited for our next guest to be on the show again. He's Greg Benton, who's a Chief Strategy Officer, who is a person that works with all of our clients in leading our business development pursuits and talking to prospective clients in the industry and that sort of thing. And I'll let him describe here in a moment what he does and a little bit about his background. But wanted him to join the show today to talk about 7 strategies for ERP implementation success, or 7 strategies to avoid ERP implementation failure, depending on how you look at it, whether you're a glass half full or a glass half empty type of person. So with all that being said, Greg, thanks for being on the show today.
Not coincidentally, and thanks for having me here today, Eric. And it's really remarkable that over the last 20 plus years, we've been looking at all aspects of this continuum that we have for digital transformation success as separate pieces. And now in today's world, in today's podcast, we're actually going to be talking about how all of those pieces need to fit together. As you stated, really bringing that into a successful implementation and deployment of your digital transformation strategy. And really looking forward to getting the audience feedback too on what we've seen in our careers all the way along, and what we're making really the core of what we do with our clients in the community right now. So let's get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to jump into it. And before we do, though, before we sort of dive into some of those strategies for implementation success / avoiding implementation failure, depending on how you want to look at it. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, as well as your role here at Third Stage.
Well, my role here at Third Stage is Chief Strategy Officer, but that really means that developing the strategy and obviously the strategy, but really how we deploy a digital transformation journey for a client. So starting from the very beginning with strategy and selection up front, making sure that we can get the most out of the implementation, and really just the rollout to the people, the process, and the technology side of whatever business or organization that we're working with. And so it's very gratifying for me in the last 20 years that I've been able to do this for, at last count, probably 40 to 50 implementations of ERP systems. I've seen ERP really evolve into more digital enterprise operations that includes multiple platforms coming together and the interoperability of those platforms to really conclude a digital transformation for an organization and return the expected benefits of that new system to them. So that entire continuum has really been my role here at Third Stage.
Yeah, and we're going to cover that whole continuum here today in today's discussion. In fact, you and I were talking before we went live here today that this is almost like the beauty of this conversation and this topic is it's almost like our water cooler talk here in the office.
And we do have a water cooler.
Exactly. We literally have a water cooler, and we literally stand around it and talk about this stuff 24/7, not 24/7, but a lot. So it'll be great to kind of share this water cooler talk here with the audience. And this is a really all encompassing topic that covers, the entire life cycle of an implementation and of a digital transformation. So with that all being said, let's jump in. And what we thought we'd do is we'd cover these 7 areas that we have in mind to start. And of course, this list is probably going to grow by the time we're done. I hope it grows because we'll get input from the audience and feedback and questions and that sort of thing. And this is meant to be, I'd say, semi-sequential, although it's not perfectly sequential because so much of this stuff happens in parallel and throughout the entire project. But to start, one of the first things that's important as far as a digital strategy that's required to be successful is to find the right technology, to choose the right software or softwares. It could be one system, it could be multiple systems. Tell us a little bit about, first of all, let me back up. You choose the wrong software and it doesn't fit your business, the odds of success are extremely low. And in fact, you could argue it's impossible to succeed when you've got the wrong software. It's just not a good fit for your organization. What are some of the things at a high level that organizations and project teams need to consider when they're evaluating software systems in the market? What are some of the things you've seen, Greg?
Well, I think absolutely as a primary, they have to think about which software system or systems, to your point, is going to work with my legacy systems, with the consolidation of some of the systems that I have that make my business or my organization unique. Very often it's not a single software system or platform that's going to answer all questions, but there's probably a best fit out there. And what many people do that ends up being a little bit of a distraction is they look at the entire marketplace. They look at, the new things that are coming around, like artificial intelligence, machine learning, and they get focused on some of these key elements or attributes of the software system without looking at the overall picture, without looking at what are your needs for finance, what are your needs for supply chain, what are your needs for human resources, human capital, payroll, all of those things. They all need to fit together, right? So choosing the right system requires preparation of the organization to really look at where is this going to benefit all work streams, all areas of the organization. As a go forward look at really just narrowed down to 2 or 3 primary candidates that won't drag the organization to its knees through a decision process. There's also got to be a cultural fit with the software organization. You need to make sure that the roadmap for that organization matches what your business imperatives are going to be over the next 5 and 10 years. So looking at a small window to pick something that has some really flashy technology is a mistake that many organizations make, and they do that from a technology standpoint, right? Instead of looking at the entire people, process, technology kind of continuum. So that's where we see a lot of people starting off on the wrong foot. And what we try to do at third stage is make sure that we're matching the technology and the people first with the software systems, narrowing it down to a very few primary candidates, also fitting within budgets and that total cost of ownership of the system, and then planning for the next 5 to 7 years in terms of deployment and then the effective use of the system.
Right. Yeah. Very, very well said. And I think, one of the things that I've seen in the last few years, and curious to get your feedback, Greg, and the audience feedback too, is that, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when I first started doing this, when organizations would go through a software selection, typically you'd hone in and focus on the big names, the names that you recognize, like SAP. Nowadays you look at S4HANA from SAP, or you look at Microsoft Dynamics 365, Oracle Fusion, sort of those big names that we've all heard, or most of us have heard. But the question I have for you, Greg, is that sort of shifted here in the marketplace. Those are still the big names. Those are still the big incumbents with the majority of market share. But we're seeing a lot of smaller, but very viable software options that are good alternatives to sort of those big names, the traditional incumbents, and curious to get your thoughts on that. How do other, maybe lesser known software and technology providers fit into this overall market as it continues to evolve?
Well, you've got the large ERP systems that you mentioned, Infor, SAP, Oracle, Workday, more recently with Workday. But also there's Epcor, IFS. There are a number of ERP systems that are up and coming and are really pulling together cloud native applications that really do a lot of the things that the big organizations do, but they may be more focused by industry, right? So getting back to the point where it needs to match your business model. It needs to match what you're looking at from a technology standpoint, but it also needs to match your people and your processes. And so pulling in some of the smaller organizations in your decision making really matches up with the entire strategy that you're putting together for the organization. There are also, we talk about best of breed. We also talk about, consolidation of some of the old legacy applications you may be running that need to operate with, for instance, UKG or Salesforce or any other of the platforms that are out there that are handling aspects of your business that need to continue. And that interoperability piece with platforms like Palantir and Snowflake and Databricks is now possible through kind of a centralized hub for interoperability, along with some of the old legacy systems that you may be sunsetting, and then some of the new systems that you may be bringing in as a complete transition or transformation to a new software system.
Right.
So it's all about unified data, right?
Yeah. I'm here with Greg Benton talking about 7 key strategies for ERP implementation success. I've got a lot more to cover with Greg, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. People oftentimes ask me how I built such a strong social media following on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and other outlets. And the fact of the matter is it took me a long time to build a following through a lot of trial and error, making a lot of mistakes. Had I known that there were companies out there that could help me build my brand, I would have done that a long time ago. I didn't know that, but the good news is that there is today a consulting firm that will help you through building your own personal brand through some of their training programs. The company is called Roloff Consulting, and if you're familiar with Emma Roloff, she's someone that I've had on this podcast before, and she's well known in the digital transformation space as well as the sales space. And she's big on TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And she and her husband have started a training course and a training company that focuses on helping people build their personal brands and helping them to sell themselves digitally. So whether you're a salesperson that's trying to reach more customers or you're an individual that's just trying to build your personal brand, that's something that they help with through their training programs. And they've offered listeners of this podcast a free 5-day LinkedIn challenge. And I encourage you to check it out. I've included a link below for this podcast. If you go to the podcast notes, you'll find a link that gets you free access to this 5-day challenge where you'll get step-by-step guidance. You'll get real results. So you'll get some tangible results from the program. And you also get a special offer at the end of it. So it's exclusive to listeners of this podcast. Be sure to check out the link below if you want to work on building your personal brand, or if you're in sales and you're trying to reach more people. Whatever the case may be, check it out. It's free to listeners of this podcast. You can check it out via the link below.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology, independent, and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 165. My name's Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also find past episodes of this show at transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. So we're here with Greg Benton talking about 7 strategies for ERP implementation success. Let's jump back into the conversation. And there's a lot of really good options out there in the market. And I think, if you look back a couple decades, you look at, Salesforce, Workday, NetSuite, those are relatively new products in the marketplace that at one point were just disruptors that were new to the market. And obviously now all 3 of those examples are very viable, large, significant players in the space. And that continues to evolve. The market continues to evolve. So I think it's the lesson here is be sure you look at your options, because if you just look at the household brand names that you're used to thinking about or looking at, you're going to limit yourself, and you're probably missing out on something that could be potentially a better fit. And I'd be curious to hear from the audience too, what technology or technologies are you most excited about? Are you most intrigued by or interested in that's out there in the marketplace, particularly some of the newer types of technologies as well. And speaking of the audience, I just want to get to some of the comments we've received so far. Want to thank Alcinda on YouTube for joining from Johannesburg, South Africa. Mohammed from Egypt, thanks for being here today on YouTube. Mitch on LinkedIn says, always refreshing to listen to Greg Benton's perspective and experiences. So
wow, thanks, Mitch.
And I'll be honest, that's the only reason I wanted you on the show is because of your rock star appeal. I knew we'd get more views, more eyeballs if you were on the show. So that's why.
Yeah, well, it's only Mitch that feels that way. So
so far, he's just the only one admitting it out loud, right? And then Saddam on YouTube says, "Hey Eric, your content is gold. Link to your book is not working. Do you mind to update?" That seems to be happening often in our social media posts. For some reason, the link shortens or changes when it posts to different platforms, and the link doesn't always redirect the way it should. But the best way to find my book is just go to thefinalcountdown.com, and that'll redirect you straight to the Amazon page where you can order that book electronically or in paperback or hardcover. So thank you for that question, and apologies for the issue there, but thefinalcountdown.com is the website you can go to there. And then also thank you to Nadim Pali, and that may not be your real name, but the username is Nadim Pali from India. Thanks for joining here today. And again, if you have questions for us as we go through the discussion here, I'd love to hear your questions and comments too. So we talked about software evaluation and selection, very high level. Obviously, we could spend the entire hour just talking about evaluating different options and what the trends are in the marketplace and that sort of thing. But choosing the right software is only sort of the entry point. That gets you in the game. It gives you a chance to succeed. But that's the good news, is you have a chance to succeed. The bad news is there's 6 other strategies that if you don't get right, it's going to lead you to failure, even if you've chosen the right software. So let's keep going here and get to the next strategy here, which is, I know, one of your personal favorites, one of my personal favorites as well, and one of the most underrated and overlooked aspects of digital transformation. In fact, I would make the argument here that this is probably the most important one. If I had to pick one that's like the one that you want to make sure you really hone in on, it's probably either this one or there's another one I might put as a close second. You probably know what I'm thinking, Greg, but we'll get to it in a second.
Yeah. I'm thinking of number 7 as one of my most important.
Yeah.
But, this one too.
Yeah. Implementation planning and phase 0. So a lot of times you see this human dynamic or this organizational dynamic with companies that are going through transformations where they go through the software selection, they evaluate their options, and they come to this realization that, wow, there's this great new software out there that's going to make us more efficient, make our jobs easier. It's going to give us AI and machine learning, all this really cool stuff that can make our business better. Great stuff, right? And people get excited. They're very excited for the prospect of getting rid of the old garbage systems that they have today and having something that's better to use in the future. And that excitement's great, right? But it creates this momentum where you sort of skip over this important step, which is strategy number 2, implementation planning in phase 0. And you just jump in and you just start deploying technology. Like, let's just get our hands dirty. Let's get in there. Let's start building the software. Let's train people on it. Let's roll it out and let's get to it. Makes sense. I mean, on the surface, as we talk through it, it makes sense that you'd want to do that. But there's this phase that often gets overlooked, and more often than not, organizations don't have the tendency to want to do this, and that is that implementation planning phase. What can you tell us about phase 0 / implementation planning? What is it? Why is it so important? How would you describe it?
There's Eric, there's some organizational momentum that comes to bear when you start talking about picking a new software system, right? Mm-hmm. It's just a tendency to want to jump into the upgrade, the new technology, and bring that in as a technology decision. Over the last 5 years, some of the leading CTOs, CIOs, CFOs within organizations have realized that, wow, if you don't prepare the organization from both a people and a technology standpoint before you really get into that implementation, you're not going to be successful. I mean, this is, phase 0 is preceding phase 1, which is the implementation process, but it's also getting your data in order. The data cleansing, which is often completely misunderstood or ignored becomes an important part of the implementation. As soon as you get into that phase one, all of a sudden you realize, wow, our data is a mess. We've got duplications, we've got a whole lot of cleansing we've got to do. And now we have to go back and do that at the beginning of the implementation. It actually stretches out the implementation and the cost considerably. So prepare the organization for going forward. That also is an opportunity to get everybody on board from an organizational change standpoint. Everyone needs to know, what is in this for me? How is this going to help me in my day job? How is this going to make things easier, streamline processes, and for the organization, provide a return on investment as soon as we get through this transformation and even along the way. So establishing KPIs that you're going to look for along the way through the implementation, and then conclude with at the end of the implementation and the stabilization phase, which we'll talk about in a minute. But all of that is prepared up front, right? So the phase zero is a critical part of this whole process.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times organizations think, well, if I do this phase zero thing that you're talking about, Greg, it's going to slow down the project. If I spend, say, 2 or 3 months getting my resources mobilized, getting a detailed and accurate project plan in place, getting my change strategy in place, mapping out my high-level business processes so I have a blueprint to start with when the system integrator comes in.
Yeah.
You start thinking about all the stuff and you think, wow, if that takes me, say, 3 months to do, that's 3 months behind schedule. And why do that when I could just start now and get a jump start on design, test, build, sort of the traditional technology work stream? Why is that a flaw? Why is that a flawed mindset or approach?
Oh, great leading question, and actually goes back to that whole saving months or shaving months off the implementation work. When you actually get the implementation team in for that design, build, and implementation work that's going forward, that's a very expensive and intensive part of the implementation work, right? It's requiring a lot of the organization's staff time. It's requiring, and then very often you also find out that what you designed as really your core project team and staffing is inadequate once you get into the implementation. So you have to hurry up, find out how you can restaff, how you can give people back some of their time so that they can manage both the implementation work as well as their day jobs. And the data is not prepared to go into the system for the design work to take place. You delay getting into systems integration testing and some of the things that need to occur along the implementation path. And so it lengthens that very intensive, very expensive implementation process. So it's really not adding time to the process. It's really an integral part of what needs to happen in order to get to a successful implementation. And it is the topic of our discussion today, right? That's that water cooler piece.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway.
Well, we have a guest that's going to be on the show here, and I think in 2 or 3 weeks. His name is Dr. Hans Mueller, and he's a professor at University of Antwerp. And I met him while I was in the Netherlands a couple weeks ago. And fascinating guy. I had an interview with him on video that'll be on my YouTube channel, but I'm also going to have him on this podcast here in a couple weeks. And one of the things he found in his research is that the number one cause of implementation delay overruns are what he calls decision latency. And so, in other words, companies that can't make decisions quickly are the ones that struggle with finishing on time and on budget. And they're the ones that end up, spending twice as much as expected, or whatever the overrun is. And when I dig into it and ask him, well, what is decision latency? What does that mean? It's basically the ability for organizations to make decisions quickly and commit to those decisions. And he talks about how in his research that the companies that even make imperfect decisions, but they make them quickly, those are the ones that are more likely to succeed versus the ones that feel like they have to get it perfect and get it right, and they take forever to make a decision. And the reason I bring this up is because implementation and planning in phase zero is a good way to get everyone aligned and on the same page with what is it we're doing here with this project. What's the overall direction? What is our business process blueprint going to look like? And I'm not talking about a business process blueprint the same way a software vendor or a technical implementer is going to think about it. They're thinking about, how do I build software? What I'm talking about is more the business architecture. How's our business going to look in the future? And when you've got that blueprint defined in phase zero, it ends up speeding up the other phases of the project to the point where you're going to save exponentially more time and money to more than overcompensate for the fact that you took a little bit more time and money up front to do this implementation planning phase 0. So I think it's a really important nuance that a lot of project teams miss.
That's very well said. And it also establishes that business case, right? So when you're going internally and you're saying, why are we doing this? The benefits realization is a part of that whole business case development. And then if you're telling your leadership and other people in the organization that you're going to be measuring this all the way along and then measure it at the end, that gives you the go-ahead to keep making these decisions along the way that are planned out, instead of, to your point, just mulling around and going, well, I don't know, we need to decide on a restaurant tonight, and we just can't make that decision. We just can't figure it out. You just need to go forward.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're interested in this topic, by the way, next week in our podcast, again, same time, same place, we're going to have Greg back on the show along with Adam Cheatham, who is our managing director at Third Stage Consulting. And the three of us are going to talk about just this topic, implementation planning in phase 0. So we're going to spend the entire hour-long discussion talking just about this. So we won't get too far into it here today. Just know that stay tuned for next week. We'll unpack this a bit more. And I want to turn to the audience before I move on to the next topic here. I'm here with Greg Benton talking about 7 key strategies for ERP implementation success. I've got a lot more to cover with Greg, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. I recently published my first book. It's called The Final Countdown: Strategies to Reach the Third Stage of Digital Transformation. And I wrote this book because I really wanted to find a concise way to share some of my knowledge around digital strategy and how to get started on a digital transformation journey. So in this book, I cover 3 different sections. I cover the people, process, and technology aspects of transformation, with the idea that it's meant to be a starting point, a launching pad for organizations and team members that are going through digital transformations. So I encourage you to buy this book. You can get it electronically, you can get it paperback, or you can get it in hard copy, as I'm holding here in front of you. You can get it by going to thefinalcountdown.com. You can also search for it on Amazon if you shop at Amazon. Otherwise, just go to thefinalcountdown.com. Love to hear your feedback on this book as well. So I hope you check it out and hope you enjoy.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me, or visit our website for more details.
These things take time, mom and dad, they have a good life. But what am I gonna do with mine?
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 165. My name's Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also find past episodes of this show at transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. So we're here with Greg Benton talking about 7 strategies for ERP implementation success. Let's jump back into the conversation. Here's an interesting comment that I know you'll appreciate as much as I do, Greg. This is from William on YouTube. He says, looks like Greg has a gold record in the background behind you. Can you tell us what that gold record is, Greg? He didn't ask this, but I'm just asking for the audience's sake.
I do. This gold record is actually the gold record that was placed on the satellite that was sent out into space, Voyager, in I forget, 1977, something like that. But it also is a kind of a prototype for the awards that we provide to our clients. In sticking with the rock and roll theme that our organization is very proud of, with Third Stage and the classic rock kind of legacy that you have brought to the organization, Eric. We award our clients based upon their trajectory or their journey along to the third stage of digital transformation success. And we have gold record recipients, platinum record recipients, and diamond record recipients. So that really is the genesis of the the gold record in the background here.
Yeah, so if you want a gold record for yourself, the message here is become a client of Third Stage. We work together. We help you through the successful phases of the project, and you get multiple gold, platinum, diamond records depending on what phase you reach of the third stage journey. So thanks for that background there. Here's an interesting question that's a good segue into our next topic, or our third strategy that we'll get here to. This is from Alcinda on LinkedIn. Alcinda says, what happens if priming the organization people takes much longer than envisaged? Wow, that is a tough one for me today. Do you proceed with the implementation and course correct throughout the journey? So in other words, it's taking longer than expected. The priming the people, getting people on board, it's just going slowly. Do you go ahead? Do you power through and continue with the implementation and course correct through the journey, or do you do something different?
I think that, let's see, is it Asina?
Alcinda, I think.
Alcinda.
I mean, that's how I pronounce it. I could be completely off, but correct me if I'm
no,
wrong.
it's very small on my screen, so.
Yeah, that doesn't
Alcinda, I apologize. No, I think that you brought up something that I think we want to discuss in terms of the 7 steps that we're talking about today to implementation success or to avoid failure. And I think you do need to power through. I think that, you can be anywhere in this journey. So you can be in strategy and selection, or even preceding strategy and selection. You can be in phase 0. You can be in any of the steps that we're going to talk about along the journey. And you can run into something that is a problem. The organization's not moving in the direction that you believe is the right direction, or that you have laid out in terms of your blueprint. We run into this all the time, where we're called in and implementation is stalled, or been, canceled, delayed, so that they can get everything back in order. That is a way of slowing things down and course correcting that leads to a lot of cost, a lot of misunderstanding, and a lot of exhaustion. So if I were to work with an organization that has basically stalled out, I would try to remove that stall and truly power forward. I think, as you stated, Eric. I mean, that's my feeling on it. You may have a different opinion of what an organization may do, but you can run into that anywhere along that continuum, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And what I would add to that, I agree with you. I think you do have to power through, because if you have, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm really struggling with words today, which is odd. But if you have, exactly, I can't say envisage. I can't think of the right words. I'm mispronouncing Alcinda's name. I mean, this whole thing's going off the rails pretty quick, but just kidding. Although I will say, just real quickly, Alcinda did confirm I am saying her name right. So thank you for confirming that.
Great.
What I was going to say is you can actually address some of this resistance by the phase 0 stuff we just talked about during implementation planning in phase 0. One of the things you want to do is an organizational assessment to understand and anticipate where the potential sources of resistance are going to come from and what those root causes are, so that you can have change strategies in place that are more surgical and targeted to your specific culture, your organization. And it's not going to solve all the world's problems. It's not going to get rid of that resistance completely, but you at least have a plan to deal with it as you're going through the project, and you're not surprised by it. And you have realistic expectations for how you're going to overcome those throughout the project. And speaking of the project and implementation, let's shift gears or sort of move into the next phase. We talked about software selection. We talked about implementation planning, phase 0. Now we get into the actual implementation. And one of the key strategies that oftentimes gets overlooked is program management / PMO. And a lot of times what happens here is that organizations will say, yeah, either A, we already have our own internal PMO, so we're all set. Although I will say the internal PMO probably doesn't have as much experience as they need to be successful on their own in managing an overall project. But we'll set that aside for a minute. The second thing that organizations often will say is, well, maybe we do or don't have our own internal PMO, but the software vendor or the system integrator is going to bring it to us. They're going to manage the project. So we're good. We've ticked this off. We checked off strategy number 3. So we're all set. But it's not quite that simple. What would you say, or how would you sort of summarize what this means in terms of a project needing to be successful?
I think you just identified the two things that we see very often, either an internal PMO or a dependence on the software vendor and the systems integrator for moving the project forward. The problem with that is the systems integrator and the software vendor are going to move things in a very project-directed direction. They're going to try to get done with the implementation and essentially move on. So controlling the kind of the organization side of the project team is not the responsibility of the systems integrator or the software vendor. They're working on their design, build, deploy strategies, and they're controlling their own teams. The internal PMO has a whole lot of trouble, especially if they're not really bought in to the entire organizational change that's going to happen, if they haven't proceeded with the phase 0 that we talked about, and they're just jumping into managing a project all the way through. It doesn't look at the overarching program, which is they don't have any control over their internal teams. There are all sorts of political currents that are moving throughout the organization that are pulling people toward, the stronger side of the HR side of the organization or the finance side of the organization. We need to have our needs met more than the HR side does. So you get these internal conflicts that nobody is watching over because internally it's not good for the PMO to be steering in a different direction. An independent program manager actually takes that objective look at the entire overarching program that's going to go forward. How are the software systems going to be integrated in our overall plan? Getting back to the whole strategy and selection, how is this going to look at the very end? And how are we going to direct the project teams and hold the software vendors, feet to the fire in terms of making sure that the software works as sold, making sure that contractual obligations are met among both the systems integrator and your internal project teams. So that whole project charter idea and moving forward with the entire organization throughout this whole process needs to be independently managed from the top. And that's what we do with our program management office.
Yeah, great point. And, you think about it, a couple things to think about to add to that is, you think of a overall program, which is different than a project. And typically the software vendor and or the system integrator, whether there's one of them or multiple vendors and system integrators, generally they're going to have project manager that's going to manage that one work stream within the overall project. But then there's other things that need to happen. We're going to get to some of these things like change management, process improvement, architecture, data integration, all these different work streams that may have their own project managers and project leads, but you can't assume that each of those project managers and project leads are going to operate within the realm of an overarching PMO and program that's going to be aligned along the different work streams. So I think that's an important thing to recognize. The other thing is you also don't want your software vendor to be the program manager, even though they're not really the program manager. They may say they are, but let's just say hypothetically they could be. You don't want them to be because they're it's the fox guarding the hen house. You don't want the software vendor saying, "Hey, let's bring on 10 more technical consultants that we need," and it's going to, by the way, benefit us as a software vendor or a system integrator. So, you want that independent, tech agnostic, objective party to provide that oversight to the PMO.
By the way, all parties on this want you to be successful, right? The software vendor wants you to get the best use out of the software so that basically you refer others to that software vendor. The SI wants to make sure that you're satisfied with the implementation and that you go on to effective use of that system. Internally, your project teams want everything to succeed. It really helps if you have that program management piece on top of everything, making sure that everything fits together and that all partners in this journey are successful together. And that's really what it is. It's not pulling different pieces, different factions together and making them work. It's working in concert.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm here with Greg Benton talking about 7 key strategies for ERP implementation success. I've got a lot more to cover with Greg, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstageconsulting.com.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 165. My name is Kimberling. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also find past episodes of this show at transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. So we're here with Greg Benton talking about 7 strategies for ERP implementation success. Let's jump back into the conversation. Now, the 4th strategy, business process management. And couple things, there's a couple things we can talk through here as we talk through business process management. I think intuitively we all know and recognize that processes are important to a digital transformation, but how you go about business processes, current state and future state, what the software can and can't do. There's all these different variables and inputs that feed into business process management. And sometimes this work stream tends to get oversimplified by software vendors when they say, hey, don't worry too much about business process management because our software solution provides the answers you need to define your future state business processes. Maybe tell us why that's a flawed approach and sort of what does this work stream mean in the context of being successful and the things you need to do to be successful as it relates to business process management.
Yeah. So the software vendors have very specific best practices based upon their software and the way that it's used. And it's very generic. In some cases, they may have an industry focus. And so those business processes may be germane to public sector or to healthcare or, a different industry. But the need for looking at your specific business processes, mapping it out, understanding the current state, understanding where you can streamline, where you can kind of reduce some of the waste in the organization in terms of either processing time, streamlined automation that is available with the new software system. Your new software system or software systems replacing the old legacy systems are going to come with that change piece, but it's also going to be, how is it going to change the way that we do our day jobs? How are we going to do different processes better, faster, and receive a return on that investment in the new digital transformation, right? That's all about the business process management and business process changes that need to occur. So you've been a huge evangelist of this. In terms of BPM overall, but also tactically making some changes to the organization and the way that they operate with the software, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, I'm going to tie a comment here, a question from Dan on YouTube. I'm going to tie this back to the point you just made, Greg, and that is from Dan on YouTube. He says, do you use an automated tool to assess digital transformation or implementation readiness? and you continue to monitor readiness throughout the project. And back to the point about business process management, we do have a tool that we use within our consulting engagements. We actually just started rolling it out to our consulting engagements recently, where we use it as a way to track, as a repository to track business processes, starting with the current state, but more importantly, getting to that refined future state that addresses pain points and opportunities for improvement and all that stuff. And we use that same tool set to manage, engage, and measure implementation readiness along the way. We also use it to tie back to strategic goals and objectives. We use it to tie back to architecture and integration. So it's a tech agnostic way to manage business processes, but also tie the business processes back to readiness, back to strategy, back to architecture, integration, and all that stuff. So that's a long way of saying, yes, we do use a tool, an automated tool to track implementation readiness as well as business process management throughout our engagements with clients. So good question there. Good points about business process management. Let's go to the next one, which is one of my favorites. Number 5, digital strategy we want to talk about here today is organizational change management. And software vendors oftentimes will say, yeah, we got that covered. We're going to do a train the trainer approach. We're going to put together some newsletters for you to send out to your team talking about how great this technology is. So check that one off your list. We've got change management covered. What are your thoughts there? Is that, I know I'm asking all these really leading biased questions. I apologize. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, another plug for a tool set and a methodology that we employ, which is third stage digital adoption. The organizational change management really requires that you understand from almost a survey standpoint where you're going to run into pockets of resistance with regard to implementing new processes, new software systems along the way, and really just kind of heat mapping that out so that you know where you need to focus on getting change agents to really bring along some of the pockets of resistance in terms of moving the organization forward into the digital transformation that you have envisioned, right? So it's nobody stopped by my desk and asked if I wanted to go on this journey. So you've got to find a way of having everyone's voice heard. And that's kind of the core of organizational change management. The digital adoption piece is really a very specific training regimen that is dedicated and customized for that client's business processes. And it's a number of video vignettes that are in a centralized repository that act as ongoing training and reinforcement of the way that you should use the software in your role, in your organization, specifically to do your day job. And all of those go hand in hand as the overarching organizational change management. OCM has been a core part of our DNA all the way from the beginning of your career. So, no one better to see how this has worked in terms of digital transformation success than you, Eric.
Yeah, and it's I think it's important to recognize that no matter how excited the organization is, and back to the point we were talking about earlier about that momentum and the excitement that people have, especially early in a project, no matter how excited they are, rest assured that excitement will start to wane, and that excitement will start to transition into more resistance. Not because people are ill-willed or nefarious or they want to sabotage the project. It's usually not that. That's actually pretty rare. We don't see that a lot in projects. What's more common though is, yeah, I'm on board, I'm excited, but I really, really don't want you to take away that spreadsheet because I've mastered that spreadsheet. And if you take that from me, that's a problem, but everything else is great. I mean, all the other changes we're talking about are great. Just that one spreadsheet though, just don't do that. And you multiply that times, 10 different concerns I might have as an individual, multiply that times however many hundreds or thousands of employees you might have, and you can see how suddenly you've got a ton of resistance to change. And that's usually what it is. It's that unintentional, below the surface sort of resistance that you've got to overcome. And so change management is important. And one of the best ways to dig into this is to do an organizational assessment that I mentioned before, ideally during implementation planning in phase 0, so that you understand what's below the tip of the iceberg. What what are those sources of resistance likely to be? Just to give you an example, I mean, a lot of times we'll work with organizations that are very excited for the project. People are on board. Executives sort of think, hey, change management is really not going to be that difficult. Everyone's telling me how excited they are, and they're all ready to go. They're volunteering to be on the project, all this good stuff. But then what happens is you see, in an example, you'll see an organizational readiness assessment where people don't collaborate. There's a lack of communication between departments. And you think, okay, well, that's fine. The new system's going to handle that. But the reality is if that's the culture of your current organization, now when you put in a new system where suddenly people are forced to collaborate more and you've got better visibility into data, that's all a net positive in the long term. But in the short term, it creates anxiety and concern. Sure. You also look at things like AI, suddenly you're going to automate my job. You're going to automate half my job. Well, what does that mean to me? What does that mean to my job? And so people start to flip, not because they're bad people or because they don't get it. It's because, in some ways they don't get it. They don't understand what they need to understand. And so that's why the change strategy is so important to understand what are the sources of resistance and how can we overcome it and anticipate what the resistance is along the way.
Well, I think you've also pointed out the dovetail between these 7 when we get done steps. Yeah. Really? This is going back to phase 0 and organizational preparedness. So
yeah, absolutely. I'm here with Greg Benton talking about 7 key strategies for ERP implementation success. I've got a lot more to cover with Greg, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
Could you whisper in my ear?
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hi, this is Kimberling with Third Stage Consulting and your host of Transformation Ground Control. I want to encourage you to read our Guide to Organizational Change Management. It's a free report or free guide that we published. It's one that I actually wrote that talks about best practices and lessons learned as it relates to change management. So as you know, on this podcast, we cover a lot of stuff related to the human sides of change, organizational change management, including training, communications, org design, all kinds of stuff as it relates to change management. So if you're trying to learn more about change management or you're looking for more direction and ideas on how to get started on your change management strategy and your overall journey, be sure to check out this guide. You can read it by scanning the QR code on the screen in front of you or in the links below for this particular podcast episode. You can find a link to take you to the page that will allow you to register to go ahead and download that and read it for free. So be sure to check it out. It's the Guide to Organizational Change Management, written by yours truly. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think, and hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 165. My name's Kimberling. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also find past episodes of this show at transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. So we're here with Greg Benton talking about 7 strategies for ERP implementation success. Let's jump back into the conversation. Here's a really good question that I don't want to wait on just because it's so relevant to everything we've talked about so far. And this is from Alcinda on LinkedIn. I notice Alcinda's bouncing between YouTube and LinkedIn, so it's interesting. I'm curious which one she's actually watching on, but not that it matters, but I'm just curious. So Alcinda says, I would have expected to see the mapping of the current state, streamlining of processes, and identifying opportunities to optimize to take place before selecting software. What are your thoughts there? We didn't really talk about this. So you didn't miss anything else. We didn't really get into this in any sort of detail. But when we talk about business process management, future state versus current state, all that stuff, how much do you do sort of as part of your selection process versus what you would do in part of your implementation planning in phase 0?
If you can get the organization to understand the need for business process management, business process optimization in the very beginning, that's a great time to do it. And also it can help you map to the right software system, right? Understanding your business processes, understanding your current state, and what the software can do to take you to the future state. What we see most often, though, is that even all the way through the implementation, organizations really haven't taken the time or the effort to map out their current state and then match it to what the software is capable of in the future state. I'm working with several clients right now that we're just embarking on the business process management piece, and it's after the implementation. So anywhere along the journey, if you can do it up front, absolutely. If you can get the organization to buy into that business process management, I would say, that's a forward-thinking organization. What often happens, though, is it needs to come in one of the next steps we'll talk about, and that's optimization. That's getting to the successful use of the new software system. So it's kind of both. I don't know if that's a specific answer to Alcinda, but it really is wherever you need it along the journey. That's where you can find the support for the business process management piece. What do you think, Eric?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, in a perfect world, if the stars align this way and you can get that buy-in that you're talking about, Greg, if you can do as much of that process work up front before you select the software, it's just going to ensure that you have a better vision of what it is you want and you're trying to get out of new technology. And it's also going to ensure that you evaluate the systems against those criteria. And it also, the more work you do around business process up front, it's sort of like a mechanism to give you control and ownership and buy-in into the overall project rather than deferring too much to a third-party software vendor or technical implementer. Instead, if you come in with a mindset of we've got our future state defined, at least at a high level, obviously you don't know what transactions you're going to use, what screens you're going to use because you don't know the technology yet, but you do know how you're going to run your business and how you want to run your business, how you want people to do their jobs and collaborate, what pain points you want to automate, all that stuff. Most organizations have a good sense of that. So if you can define as much of that as you can up front, that business process blueprint gives you, it really arms you and equips you to take ownership of the project, which is a big problem with projects or with implementations in general, where organizations don't have ownership and they defer and outsource too much to the software vendors and the system integrators. And they want you to, by the way, they're encouraging you to do that because they make more money. They can close the deal faster if you don't take the time to do business processes up front. So they're going to do things to pressure you to not do the things that slow down their sales cycles. But those things that slow down their sales cycles are the ones that are better for you long term. And so you have to know how to navigate that dynamic there. What are your thoughts, Greg?
I think that you're exactly right. And once you get into the software vendor of choice and you're working with them, the answer to any business process question is, oh, well, we handle that. You just need to buy more software. We've got a module for that. So if you can avoid getting down that path, I think that's awesome. But most organizations, get to the point where they've got the software, they've got a bright, shiny new platform that everything is supposed to run forward on, and there hasn't been the part of the business process mapping and understanding of how we're going to effectively use this software to provide a return on our investment to the organization. And that needs to be done anywhere along the line. So, it can be done during implementation. It can be done after implementation. It's best done before, but as you stated, it's very difficult to get the organization to buy into spending a great amount of capital on, looking at the business process mapping. It's not completely understood at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Now, we've got a few minutes here, and I want to make sure we get to these last two because they're really important. But number 6 on our 7 digital strategies to avoid ERP implementation failure, go live and stabilization. What can you tell us about this? We've had a couple big clients that have just gone live recently in the last few weeks. Yeah. So we've got some good battle wounds and stories from those recent go lives on different platforms. But what can you say about go live and stabilization? Why is it important? What should we be thinking about?
And I will say, you know who you are out there.
They're probably listening right now.
I'm sure they're listening right now. Love that they're listening. But the go live is something that we're aiming for all the way along, right? We're going through the implementation. We're going through all of the steps that we described up until this point. Go live seems to be, the conclusion of all of this work, everything that everyone's put in. Everyone's celebrating, jumping up and down, saying, "Yeah, we're live, we're live, we're live." The stabilization piece is over the next couple of months. I mean, software vendors and systems integrators call it hypercare, right? So it's the post go live situation where you're looking at how are we going to make sure that we answer all the issues, that we conclude the training and the effective use of the software going forward among all of our people, that we make sure that payroll goes out, that we make sure that everything happens with regard to the way that our business needs to operate post go live. We call that period stabilization because it is getting everyone acclimated to what it's going to take from a staffing standpoint ongoing, what it's going to take from a resource perspective, both in working with the software vendor and as the systems integrator rolls off or the implementation team rolls off, who's going to support that internally? How are we going to build our organization to handle the way that this is going to have to be operated going forward? And that is a very important stage. If it's not prepared for properly, go live is not successful. And we get back to the theme of our conversation here. This is where most implementations fail. So they fail to reach the level of ongoing operations or digital enterprise operations that sustains this new software system. And we'll talk about the next step, which is getting to the effective use of that system, right? But this is a very important stage that everyone goes through, and it is the point which determines success or failure in the implementation.
Yeah, it's also not only determining success or failure, it's determining how much you're going to spend on this project. Because a lot of times organizations think, well, I'm going to spend $1 million on the implementation project, and I'm going to manage the project to ensure I finish on time, on budget, $1 million within 18 months or whatever it is. And they're so hyper focused on hitting those metrics that they don't think about, well, what does the cost look like on the other side? So congratulations, you implemented for less than $1 million. You did it in 18 months, like you said you would, but we went live and now we can't ship product. We can't service our customers. We can't close the books. We can't run payroll. Those are huge costs that oftentimes dwarf the actual implementation cost. But organizations get so myopically focused on, we've got to manage to a budget. We've got to manage to a timeline. So my lesson or my thought here would be to make sure that you don't go live if you're not ready, even if it means you're delaying the project. It's not pretty. No one wants to do it. And I'm not suggesting you are too loose with that option, but there's times where it makes a lot more sense to delay a go live than it does to put your operations at risk and your customer satisfaction at risk, your employee morale at risk, all that stuff that's going to cost you a lot more longer term.
Absolutely.
I'm here with Greg Benton talking about 7 key strategies for ERP implementation success. I've got a lot more to cover with Greg, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. People oftentimes ask me how I built such a strong social media following on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and other outlets. And the fact of the matter is it took me a long time to build a following through a lot of trial and error, making a lot of mistakes. Had I known that there were companies out there that could help me build my brand, I would have done that a long time ago. I didn't know that, but the good news is that there is today a consulting firm that will help you through building your own personal brand through some of their training programs. The company is called Roloff Consulting, and if you're familiar with Emma Roloff, she's someone that I've had on this podcast before, and she's well known in the digital transformation space as well as the sales space. And she's big on TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And she and her husband have started a training course and a training company that focuses on helping people build their personal brands and helping them to sell themselves digitally. So whether you're a salesperson that's trying to reach more customers or you're an individual that's just trying to build your personal brand, that's something that they help with through their training programs. And they've offered listeners of this podcast a free 5-day LinkedIn challenge. And I encourage you to check it out. I've included a link below for this podcast. If you go to the podcast notes, you'll find a link that gets you free access to this 5-day challenge where you'll get step-by-step guidance. You'll get real results. So you'll get some tangible results from the program. And you also get a special offer at the end of it. So it's exclusive to listeners of this podcast. Be sure to check out the link below if you want to work on building your personal brand, or if you're in sales and you're trying to reach more people. Whatever the case may be, check it out. It's free to listeners of this podcast. You can check it out via the link below.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology, independent, and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 165. My name's Eric Kimberling. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also find past episodes of this show at transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. So we're here with Greg Benton talking about 7 strategies for ERP implementation success. Let's jump back into the conversation. So one last one here, the 7th point, the 7th strategy. I'm actually surprised we got through all 7. I was a little skeptical that you and I, we would actually be able to get through all 7.
We're at the end of time, right?
I know, and we are out of time. So technically we haven't really gotten through all 7 yet, but in an hour. But this one is post-go live optimization. Most people sort of draw a line in the sand and say, great, we went live. Let's take a deep breath, sigh of relief. Let's go back to our day jobs and declare victory. Why is that a flawed assumption? What should we be doing after go live to optimize our results and optimize business value?
Well, again, these industry analysts say that 70% of implementations fail. And that is truly the case if you're not getting to the point where you're getting the return on the investment that you originally envisioned, or even that the organization didn't originally envision, right? Effective use of the software, streamlining processes, getting the new shiny system that's in place to operate in the way that it is optimally going to, conduct all of the processes underlying going forward. And so in many cases, this is the point where you really do map out those business processes to avoid people going back to or reverting back to the way that they did things before, and making sure that the adoption is complete, that they're starting to use the system in the proper way, that if you have pieces of this that you can streamline or take some of the unnecessary actions out of the organization and save time, save money, save reporting. So getting away from the old customized reports and having an enterprise-wide strategy for how you funnel up information and data and operate based upon those insights that you get from the organization. All of that stuff goes into the optimization, which is post-stabilization, post-go live.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's where the biggest amounts of business value oftentimes is what you do after go live. I mean, because a lot of times, let's be honest, you go live and you end up stabilizing and focusing on, let's just make sure we can ship product. Let's just make sure we can run the business. We're not thinking necessarily about that higher level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs of let's get to that optimization phase. We're just trying to survive. Let's just make sure we don't screw anything up, which is fine. Don't screw anything up. I'm not saying to let that go, but once you haven't screwed anything up, you go live, you stabilize. Now you've got to figure out how can we get that low hanging fruit of business value? And so many times you go into these projects and it's so easy. Like you look at all the heartache and hard work you just went through to go through an implementation.
Yeah.
The optimization stuff is so easy. It's just like you've done all the work. You've done 99% of the work. You just need to do that one last little 1% that's going to give you a huge amount of value in terms of, maybe it's just some simple refresher training, or maybe a process just wasn't quite defined right, and you just need to tweak that process. You need to reconfigure something, whatever. It's usually not like major stuff unless you totally screwed up the project. But generally speaking, it's real easy fixes. But too many organizations say, well, it's time to move on to the next phase of the project, or it's time to go back to our day jobs, and they don't really think about optimizing after the fact.
Yeah. So you said that one of your favorite steps was phase 0. Mine too. But this is absolutely my favorite step.
Your number one favorite out of all of them.
Number one favorite.
Why is that? Is because there's so much value there, or because it's so overlooked, or what do you think?
Yeah, because it is so overlooked, because people get to the end and celebrate. I've been guilty of that too. I mean, not guilty, but yeah, everyone wants to end the project, right? You get to the end and wow, that's the end. But it's not getting the value that's needing to be recognized by leadership, by the community, by the organization as a whole, right? And so people think that the implementation was successful in the go live, but it really kind of failed to meet the value that we expected, or the return that we expected from the very beginning. So this is closing that loop. This is bringing it full circle so that for the next 5 to 10 years, you have effective use of the new shiny system that you put in place.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. Super exciting. Yeah. It's very cool. Yeah. So, I mean, I'd love to keep going on this, and we will at some point in the future, but we're
next week.
Time. Yeah. Next week. Yeah, that's right. You'll be back next week talking Shameless plug. Next week, you'll be back, and you'll be with Adam Cheatham and myself. We're going to talk about the phase 0 stuff in a lot more detail. All right. Thank you, Greg. Great conversation. Love that concept, and love the topics we covered there. So much so that next week, in next week's episodes of this show, we are going to talk about implementation planning in phase 0. We're going to have Greg and another colleague from Third Stage Consulting on the show next week, and we'll talk about that in a lot more detail next week. So stick around and watch next week's episode if you're interested in that. We'll get into more of the hows and the best practices just around that phase of the project. So we're going to shift gears here in a second and bring on a panel discussion. It's actually a panel discussion I had several months ago at a big ERP vendor conference, where myself and 3 other people from the supply chain and manufacturing industry were in a panel discussion talking about trends in manufacturing and supply chain management. So we're going to play you that conference panel discussion here in just a moment. But first, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. My name is Eric Kimberling, and I'm the CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to invite you to learn a little bit more about Third Stage Consulting, who we are and what we do. We help clients through their entire digital transformation life cycles, beginning with digital strategy, software evaluation and selection, all the way through and including implementation planning, implementation readiness, and the actual implementation itself. We're technology agnostic, so we only represent our clients' best interests. We do not represent software vendors. But having said that, we work very closely with software vendors, all the leading players that you can imagine we've worked with, both in helping clients evaluate and select them, but also in helping clients implement those solutions as well. So we have a very broad, objective, agnostic view of the market that is meant to really represent your interest as you go through your digital transformation. I also encourage you to scan this QR code right here to get access to our resource center. This resource center has a ton of information, ton of ebooks that are free. You have access to top 10 software rankings, playbooks for how to make your project more successful, guides to change management, YouTube videos, all kinds of stuff that are going to help you through your digital transformation. So I encourage you to scan this QR code to get access to those resources. And please feel free to reach out to me directly to brainstorm ideas about your project. Even if it's just informally, you want to bounce around some ideas and get some informal advice, I'd be happy to spend some time with you. So feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. You can also find it in the description field of this video as well.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney. focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 165. My name is Kimberling. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can also go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to view and listen to all past episodes of the show, all 164 past episodes. So be sure to check it out at transformationgroundcontrol.com. I'm the CEO of a company called Third Stage Consulting, who is also the sponsor of this podcast. Third Stage is an independent and tech-agnostic consulting provider that helps clients throughout the world with their digital strategies, their software selection, their implementation planning, their implementation program management, change management, all the stuff you need to be successful in your project. Those are services we provide for our global client base. So be sure to learn more about us at thirdstage-consulting.com. So speaking of Third Stage, myself and the Third Stage team were recently at the Epicor Insights Conference. And Epicor is a large software vendor. We go to all different types of software vendor conferences throughout the year. This particular vendor asked me to be on a panel discussion to talk about trends in manufacturing and supply chain management. And so what I wanted to do today is play you the recording from that conference where myself and three other panelists talk about some of the trends in supply chain and manufacturing, particularly as it relates to ERP implementation. So with that being said, let's roll the clip of trends in manufacturing and supply chain management.
Our first panelist is Kimberling, right to my left here. He's a global digital transformation expert, highly recognized independent ERP systems expert. Welcome.
Thank you.
We also have Mueller, who's Director of ERP Systems, who's leading the charge in cloud adoption, continuous improvement, and M&A onboarding at Enjet Aero. Welcome. And lastly, we have David Holm, who is president of Kiski Precision and operations leader with over 20 years of experience in manufacturing precise motion solutions. So welcome all of you. And now what we'd like to do is hear a little bit more about your company. I know, Andy, you gave us kind of a little bit of the highlights. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
You bet. Thanks for the opportunity, Christine. So again, my name is Andy Hrasky. I work for Magna International, and in some circles I find that Magna is the largest company that a lot of people don't know anything about. So a little bit about more what Magna does. We're a mobility company, and frankly, a lot of our revenue right now is generated and has been by being one of the top tier one automotive suppliers in the industry. We do so running a company that's just under $40 billion in revenue. We have 341 manufacturing centers and another 88 product development centers across the globe, operating out of 29 countries. We do so with 171,000 employees. My role with the company has to do with stuff you don't see on a car. So in fact, Magna is present on about 80% of all vehicles manufactured today has some sort of content. The pieces that I'm focused on are a lot of the underbody structure, things you don't see, frames, now battery trays with electrification, which we'll talk more about. And those divisions are specifically within a group called Cosma and within our USA West region. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, great. Nick, can you give us a little more insight into Enjet Aero and how you deliver precise motion?
Yeah, thank you. Enjet Aero is a precision manufacturing for the aerospace engine sector. We do machining, fabrication, multi-part assemblies for pretty much any engine that is up in the air. We're a company that's new. We've been around since 2017, built on acquisition. We're 9 manufacturing facilities starting in the Midwest, moving up through the East Coast, kind of taking the aerospace engine supply chain or supply market over and being the best.
Very good. And David, we'd all be interested in how your plant floors are automated with your motion technology. Can you tell us a bit more about Aerotech?
Sure, Christine, thank you. And thank you for having me. Aerotech is a high-precision motion control company. What does that mean? Well, that means that we move things back and forth and round at levels of precision that nobody can see and very few people even understand. We have the markets that we serve are the energy industry, medical device manufacturing, consumer electronics, and the semiconductor industry. We have 8 companies operating internationally, and some of the cool things that we do with Epicor, we finitely schedule over 20,000 jobs every Saturday. We run MRP every weekday evening. We use Capable to Promise to schedule every new order that comes in. And we also are able to close our books financially every month within 24 hours.
Whoa. All right, Eric, you can go after that. Thank
Sure,
you for joining us today. Business is really focused on helping companies optimize the use of technology to solve and elevate their businesses. How does your organization help manufacturers?
Sure. Well, thanks for having us, and that is a tough act to follow after these 3. But my name's Eric Kimberling, was CEO. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting, and we help manufacturers define their digital strategies and roadmaps, which includes evaluating and selecting technology. But then we also help them through the implementations as well. So we help with some Epicor implementations as well as other system providers. We're independent technology agnostic, which means we're not affiliated with Epicor, although we have a great relationship with Epicor. And that's primarily how we help them, is through the entire transformation journey.
Very good. Okay, so let's get started, panelists. Now, the first topic we're going to talk about is around innovation. And many businesses today, this is something that we're obviously is top of mind for many of us, is top trends in sustainability. And this has been a primary driver for a lot of innovation that we're seeing today in particular. And I know, Andy, your business is at the forefront of this. How is this trend impacting you, and what are some of the opportunities that you're seeing as a result?
Great question, Christine, and I think the word sustainability evokes a lot of things for me, but mostly it is the transformation of the automotive industry and this whole electrification that's happening. That is what I wake up every morning thinking about and go to bed every night, if I'm lucky, thinking about as well. So this is literally, it's the one of the most transformative times we've ever been through in automotive. The billions, tens, hundreds of billions, in fact, that are being invested in this are quite extraordinary. We have seen this as a real opportunity, but also a threat, as many of us have. So a lot of the work that we take pride in is done on underbody structure in vehicles, as I said, and that's looking a lot different these days. So where we would usually have a frame, now we may have a structural battery tray, or we may have a frame with a non-structural battery tray. So we're getting involved in all of those areas, and happy to say things are going well so far. The other point that comes to mind when we talk about sustainability is getting more effective and efficient use out of our transportation modes. So transportation as a service. And I believe as autonomous driving gains popularity, as the technology matures, there's going to be a time when transportation truly is a service, and we're ordering vehicles to come pick us up and take us from point A to point B, and then they go on to pick up the next person. And I don't think that's that far off, 12 to 15 years. Those are my thoughts.
Wow. And I know, Nick, we had conversations yesterday. We were at the same table. We talked a little bit about what's happening in the aerospace industry as well. And, some drivers around efficiency that you're seeing perhaps, and how you're being impacted from an innovation perspective.
Yeah, thank you. Similar to what Andy said, motion is the planes that are flying in the air have the same initiatives. They want to get as many people moving as fast as they can and as efficiently as they can. So that's creating new innovation, new design, kind of rewriting the script on that. So we're seeing the same opportunities on that to get the industry as efficient as they can. Definitely the grounding of a lot of the old aircraft has pushed some of that too during the 2020 timeframe. So we're seeing a lot of new design developments coming out from it.
All right, very good. So now I'd like to do just a little bit of a double click into what's happening in the businesses in terms of innovation and the pace that you're seeing today. I know, David, recently I was able to visit your plant and see innovation in process. What can you share about how automation and motion are colliding and the pace of it, and how you're currently managing that?
Sure, Christine. So Aerotech traditionally would operate in mechanical and air-bearing systems. And we had our niche, and we would focus on either the manufacturing process or the inspection process at hand. But our customers have been demanding much more from us, not just in terms of our traditional motion capabilities. They've started to push the boundaries of how we do things. For example, we used to move a part underneath a fixed laser, and now using light manipulation technology, we actually move the laser instead of the part that's being manufactured. It's fair to say that 80% of the people in this room are impacted by that technology. They just don't know it. And not only that, but our customers are expecting us to understand the upstream and downstream parts of the manufacturing process as well. So we're being asked to understand how to hand off from a system that we did not manufacture, and be able to understand that. So the employment of automation engineers and investments in those areas are something we're definitely focused on.
We're here playing you a clip of a panel discussion of myself and 3 others talking about trends in manufacturing and supply chain management. We've got a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are aiming for transformation success, turn to Third Stage Consulting Group. Third Stage's independent and technology agnostic consulting team helps clients define their digital strategies, define their roadmaps, and manage their transformations. With offices in the US, Europe, and Australia, our team helps the world's most forward-thinking organizations through their transformation pitfalls and risks. If you are embarking on a digital transformation or business change initiative, contact Third Stage Consulting to see how we can help you reach the third stage of transformation success. Learn more about us and download independent reports, videos, and other best practices at thirdstage-consulting.com.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 165. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. We're here playing you a clip from a conference where I recently was on a panel discussion talking about trends in manufacturing and supply chain management. Let's jump back into the conversation.
And I know, Andy, I just went to your website and I could see every component of every vehicle today. It looks as if it's being rethought. How is this impacting what you do and how is your business coping?
Hey, you're right, Christine. I think all of those, most of what we see in a vehicle is changing. And I spoke earlier about a little bit of that structural work, but when I think about the processes that are being used to make those new products, the industry is doing a very good job, automotive for sure, in starting to use new joining technologies. So laser welding is a lot more prevalent than it used to be. We're learning a lot really fast. And at the same time, we're learning about a lot of new technologies and different ways to put things together. We also have a lot higher expectation from customers. So with the headlines on thermal incidents when it comes to electrification and all of these things, the burden on built-in quality and traceability of every step of every process is greater than it ever has been. And that's something that we're really putting a lot of attention to and investment in, to be sure.
Very good. So Eric, I want to bring you into the conversation now a little bit. I expect that, the clients that you work with, they're facing similar challenges. Are there any best practices that are being deployed to help manage this rate of change and innovation?
Yeah, it's a great question. And technology today is just changing so much. And we've seen a lot of that here throughout the Insights Conference, and some of the advancements and investments that Epicor has made in technology is sort of a microcosm of a bigger trend, which is technology is just changing at an accelerated pace. However, humans' ability to keep up with that technological change is not accelerating at as rapid of a pace. And David made an interesting comment earlier. Something you said that really stuck out was, it's a technology that impacts our daily lives, but we don't know it. And that's what you want. That's, to me, the ideal state of a transformation is you're using technology to drive innovation and to drive improvements to your business without it being disruptive in a negative way. And too often we get caught up in that chasm between technological change and humans' inability to keep up or difficulty keeping up. So back to the question about what are some of the best practices to manage that rate of innovation, you have to marry the technology and the technological tools with the process improvements that some of these guys have talked about, as well as the organizational and cultural change that goes along with that. Because just putting the tool in place by itself isn't going to drive innovation. It provides a framework or a foundation to potentially do it, but unless you add process improvement and the organizational change and the human component and the cultural shift that needs to happen along with that, that's really the secret sauce or the magic touch that you need to add to a transformation to actually drive that sort of innovation.
Very good. Thank you. No, very good. So let's transition to a topic all of us are very well aware of. This is around the supply chain, where we have disruption and cost and change that are all aspects of our supply chain challenges that we're feeling today. I'd be interested in what aspect is most painful for your business and how it's responding. And I know, Nick, yesterday we had a conversation about, the aerospace and defense supply chain. What have you found and how are you responding with some of those challenges?
Yeah, thank you. Probably like most people in here, supply chain's been tough. It's been the hardest thing to overcome right now in manufacturing. And so what we've had to do is get creative. Lead times are extending, just actual supply availability. You didn't have multiple places where you could just go and get all the material you needed. Now you're going to multiple places to just get enough material that you can make what you need. You're having to forecast further than your customers are forecasting for their demand. And to do that, you kind of have to get creative with your data. I heard this morning on the stage talking about, the town you're from or the demographics you're from, things like that. And you kind of have to think outside the box with your analytics of what you're going to predict is needed so that you don't end up in a situation. Because when you're talking 2 years lead time, you can't miss. You have to be ready. And you can't risk the inventory because the cash is king and you don't want to be sitting on it. So.
Absolutely. So David, let's shift to you. In the past, you've referred to dramatic material cost increases as being a challenge. How are you responding to this? And just as importantly, how are your customers responding and how are you helping them?
So the material costs have had a significant impact on our bottom line. There's no question about that. Aerotech is a forever company. We expect to be here forever, and that's the way we operate every day. And the way we've decided to handle the rising material costs is to not pass that on to our customers in the way of updating orders that are on the books with new prices. So we've essentially decided to eat those costs. We've made some price increases for the future, but we felt like it was in our best interest of our customers that that's the way we treated the problem. So because we took that stance, it forced us to be very creative internally with how to keep those costs as minimal as possible. So one of the ways that we've been able to do that is through developing our own internal services and companies that we can not only provide internal services for Aerotech, but we can also sell those services to other people as well.
Well, good. So let's shift to another topic. This is around automation and the smart factory. These solutions are mentioned by several of you to improve productivity on the plant floor, and it's a key strategy to produce more with less. Where are you in your automation strategy, and what does your 3 to 5 year plan look like? And I'd actually be interested, before I ask the question of any of you, how many of you in the room, with a show of hands, currently have an IoT project that you're working on? Quite a few of you. How many of you are connecting that IoT project with Kinetic? Okay, so I'm seeing a few opportunities for us here, and I know we talked about this yesterday as well. So let's see, so David, I go to you first here. So your business is at the heart of automation. Where do you think this technology is taking us?
So interestingly enough, Christine, we've been in automation for 50 years, but we are heavily an engineer-to-order company. We make one of something a lot. And that's difficult to automate because if you're never going to make it again, you don't really want to make that investment. So with that said, however, in recent years, we have started to deploy collaborative robots to do automated machine tending from a machining perspective. They do an assembly operation. And recently we've invested in laser welding technology similar to Magna, and we use the collaborative robots for that as well.
Very good. So Andy, off to you. So I know you have these planned strategies in this area. I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about what you're doing there.
Yeah, you bet, Christine. I think a lot of this electrification and autonomous driving is happening at the same time we're going through this Industry 4.0 revolution, and just so many different priorities. This is an area that we have, as a company, have invested strongly in as part of the $1 billion that we're investing in just the 7 plants that I'm working with today. There's a good piece of that budget that's going into just creating the foundation for different IoT projects, et cetera. I think to pick up on where Dave was talking, we build a lot of the same thing a whole lot of times. So we're high volume repetitive manufacturing. And what I'm most excited, I don't understand a lot of this stuff. I depend on people a lot smarter than me, but what I can see on our shop floors is a much better use of efficiency data. So not a very sexy topic, but we're doing a lot more than just measuring throughput by what comes out of the end of an assembly line. We're giving operators the ability to be able to control each and every cycle, give them visual information on exactly what the expectation is, what the standard is, allow those team leaders to be looking at dashboards so that they can offer assistance where needed. This is one of the most salient examples that I've seen so far in our business, and just doing as well a much better job of fault identification and getting that fault information to bubble up to action levels. We've always had the data, we always say we use it, we track mean time to failure, mean time to repair, we do all of this, but we've never really had in-our-face data summarized to a point where we can act on it when it's happening, and that's pretty exciting to me.
Yeah.
We're here playing you a clip of a panel discussion of myself and 3 others talking about trends in manufacturing and supply chain management. We've got a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. People oftentimes ask me how I built such a strong social media following on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and other outlets. And the fact of the matter is it took me a long time to build a following through a lot of trial and error, making a lot of mistakes. Had I known that there were companies out there that could help me build my brand, I would have done that a long time ago. I didn't know that, but the good news is that there is today. a consulting firm that will help you through building your own personal brand through some of their training programs. The company's called Roloff Consulting, and if you're familiar with Emma Roloff, she's someone that I've had on this podcast before, and she's well known in the digital transformation space as well as the sales space. And she's big on TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And she and her husband have started a training course and a training company that focuses on helping people build their personal brands and helping them to sell themselves digitally. So whether you're a salesperson that's trying to reach more customers or you're an individual that's just trying to build your personal brand, that's something that they help with through their training programs. And they've offered listeners of this podcast a free 5-day LinkedIn challenge. And I encourage you to check it out. I've included a link below for this podcast. If you go to the podcast notes, you'll find a link that gets you free access to this 5-day challenge where you'll get step-by-step guidance. You'll get real results. So you'll get some tangible results from the program. And you also get a special offer at the end of it. So it's exclusive to listeners of this podcast. Be sure to check out the link below if you want to work on building your personal brand, or if you're in sales and you're trying to reach more people. Whatever the case may be, check it out. It's free to listeners of this podcast. You can check it out via the link below.
Interested in working for a company that truly values your unique skills and experience? Here at Third Stage, we don't hire based on resumes alone. We look at the full candidate, experience, and willingness to provide excellent service for our clients. Within a technology, independent, and agnostic consulting firm, you have the opportunity to learn across industries with a diverse group of clients. Our consultants also have the opportunity to diversify their portfolio and learn across technology systems. If you're interested in joining a high-growth entrepreneurial organization, please reach out to us at work@thirdstage-consulting.com.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 165. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. This show is produced by Major Tom Productions. It's sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. We're here playing you a clip from a conference where I recently was on a panel discussion talking about trends in manufacturing and supply chain management. Let's jump back into the conversation.
So Eric, we'd all be interested to know how your clients are approaching these similar projects and what some of the top lessons learned are.
Sure. So essentially what we're talking about and what the responses so far have alluded to is a business model change. I mean, we're looking at ways that we can use technology to transform the way we do business. And the last thing we want to do is invest all this time and money in modern technology just to pave the cow paths and just to do things the way we've always done. So this really involves changing and rethinking our business. And that's what's so important to take the time to do during projects like this. And too often organizations get really caught up in, we're going to implement Epicor or whatever the system is. We're going to implement Epicor and we're going to do it in, say, 12 months. We've got to get that done in 12 months. That might be a realistic time frame, but you've got to look at it not just from the perspective of putting in new technology, but how are you going to rethink your business and how are you going to change your business processes, your operating model, your overall business model to really leverage these technologies. And sometimes that takes longer than, say, 12 months. And so you really have to find that right balance between trying to optimize implementation time and cost and business value. And again, back to the point I made earlier, so much of the technology is changing rapidly and creating these huge gaps between where we are today, where we could be in the future, that it takes you longer to get there than just to put in technology, than the time it might take to put in technology. So focusing on that future state operating model, as well as the organization and what that's going to look like, what your overall business model is going to be, taking the time to do the hard work behind that is really what will make the project successful. And our most successful clients are the ones that can do that piece of it well.
Oh, very good. Let's move on to another topic, and this is something that's been top of mind at many of the lunch tables that I've been at this week around artificial intelligence. Yesterday in the keynotes and throughout the conference, AI has been a point of conversation. What do you foresee on the horizon as far as how your industry will leverage AI? David, if you wouldn't mind starting for us.
Sure, Christine, no problem. So I'm a degreed software engineer, and I was very proud of that. And it's a bit humbling to know that pretty much anybody in this room can go online now and ask the computer to create the types of software that I built my career on. So the times are certainly changing from an artificial intelligence standpoint. At Aerotech specifically, that's certainly an area that we're investigating, is the auto generation of software. But I think immediately its applications are probably better served on the legal and maybe administration side. The tools that are out there can lend themselves pretty well to helping you create documents and policies and things like that much faster than I certainly can. But I think there's always going to be a human in the loop, somebody who's going to have to make that decision, because there's a regulatory element to just turning the keys over to the computer in total.
Yeah, very good points. Nick, I know that from a regulatory and a security perspective, your team is very mindful of the impact of this as well. So how are you approaching this new frontier?
Yeah, I mean, definitely with the regulations that we're held under from the DoD and things like that, we take a little caution to it. Obviously, we want to see where we can benefit from it, where we can have a use case, but we have to be mindful of our regulations. So I would say that we're probably not as out on the forefront, but also looking at where we can get there using the technology.
I know that this is a bit off script, but we had a nice conversation yesterday about your thoughts around how AI can help employees. And you had a nice comment about what employees want to do and how AI might be able to help them. Do you remember, or do you want me to?
I mean, absolutely. The technology is moving faster than the person, right? And,
Sure.
and the adoption of that technology is probably moving faster than society. It all sounds great, it moves great, but we also have to get the people to understand and build them up. You have to bridge the gap of the people that don't know and the people that are learning, and get everybody involved. Otherwise, it's not going to do any good to have it. I think that's one of the keys to utilizing it, is use it as a tool to build up the people, to build a better productivity, and use it for that purpose. So.
Oh, very good. I have a question here for you also on security, if you don't mind, because I know that it's not just the new technology, but how do we maintain that security level, especially in the aerospace and defense? I know automotive cares about it. Everyone cares about security today. Can you give us some insights into how your business is approaching security, some of the best practices that you've seen, and how you're doing that?
Yeah. Definitely when it comes to our ERP, the short answer is we're going to rely on Epicor to do that. That's why we chose to go to the cloud. We don't want to have to, we want to worry about it, but we also that's why we pay Epicor to worry about it for us, so we can worry about the other things that we have to get parts to our customers. But also, some of you might be aware of the CMMC requirements that are being handed down through the industry. That's one of our big initiatives that we have to abide by. So everything that we implement as far as technology has to kind of run through that filter to make sure it meets the requirements.
Very good. And I know, Andy, we talked a little bit about security from your perspective as well. Can you maybe add a few comments?
Sure. Yeah, I think I echo Nick's sentiments, and not to bore everyone with the same message, but what I think about on AI is it gets right to that data security and the scary parts of it that we don't yet understand. So it's happening, it's going to happen, but a lot of uncertainties in our industry. I believe that the people are always we're going to be people-centric. There are a lot of responsibilities, as David also talked about, and a lot remains to be seen, and tread carefully.
All right. So we shall see. In terms of business expansion, here we're looking at business growth. It can be either organic or through acquisition. And we've had several nice acquisitions ourselves, as we shared with you yesterday. Increasing capability through acquisition, Eric, what is your thoughts on whether this is going to continue across the industry?
I think it absolutely will. And if you look at what's happening at a macro level in the industry or in the economy right now, you have a couple of things coming together to create a perfect storm. And one is the advanced technological change. Anytime technological change accelerates, it creates disruption, it creates opportunity to unlock hidden value in organizations, which typically leads to M&A sorts of activity. You throw on top of that the ripple effect of COVID and how that's affected the supply chains throughout the world. It's forced organizations to rethink the way they do business and the way they run their supply chains. That too leads to more acquisition, more M&A activity. And then I think just in general, with the economy going through some rough patches right now, in general, anytime the economy is disrupted, it tends to lead to more M&A activity. So I'd say in our client base globally, it's probably 60 to 70% of them or more of our clients that we work with right now throughout the world are going through some sort of M&A activity. They're out actively acquiring companies or merging or trying to figure out how to integrate existing operations. So it's something that I don't see slowing down anytime soon.
Very good. Nick, I know your company's been in acquisition mode, and I know that you're the master of acquisitions in terms of operationalizing them. Can you maybe give us some of your best practices that you've found?
Yeah, I mean, best practice is probably the key word out of that is, so when we have an acquisition, the first thing we do is we have our model that, we're going to implement. We have our best practices, and they've worked for us for what we have. But just because they've worked for 8 conversions doesn't mean that we have everything. So the first thing we are going to do is figure out what's best between what we're bringing on with what we have. We keep it a pretty simple approach. We keep it a fast approach. We keep it vanilla as we can. That has been our key to success. The other side of that is our focus with an acquisition is to, from a ERP standpoint, is let them focus on the thing that they're good at, and that's making product and delivering it to the customer. And we'll take care of the back office side of that. We don't want them to waste their time on the things that aren't making parts for them. So,
Christine, last night at dinner, there was the topic came up about acquisitions and how they're done. I only have experience at this with one. And I didn't really know what I was doing as far as that goes. It was a learning lesson for sure. But when I described what we did to somebody else at the table, they indicated that more people who are in acquisition mode should do that. And that's really moving fast, right, to Nick's point. In my case, it was a very small company that we acquired, and we converted them from their old former ERP system to Epicor in the first 4 days that we bought them. And like I said, it was relatively small, but put the team to task and said, this is what we're going to do, and it eliminated all of their previous operations immediately. And the sooner you can do that, I think the better off you are from an acquisition standpoint.
I thought we were good at 94 days.
Like I said, it was small, Nick. It's small,
But you got to find those small wins. That's what you got to do. You got to find that quick small wins that you can gain with them, because they're going through a lot of change during that process anyways. They're drinking from a fire hose, and giving them a little bit of relief quickly definitely helps that process for the entire acquisition process.
And one of the things that I didn't realize when we did that 4 days, and I didn't learn this until months later, the person who was part of the acquisition company, who was responsible for the previous ERP system, he was petrified of his job.
Yeah.
I mean, he told me again months later after he realized that, okay, he's got a future and, okay, it might be doing something else or working in a different system. But he confided in me that I was assured, he thought for certain I was going to lose my job. He said, you had everything that we do as a company done in 4 days, right? That's really impressive. I didn't think that you needed me. So the people management, the change management when you go through an acquisition is probably even more important than the technical one.
I agree, by the way. We're here playing you a clip of a panel discussion of myself and 3 others talking about trends in manufacturing and supply chain management. We've got a lot more to cover, but first we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. I recently published my first book. It's called The Final Countdown, Strategies to Reach the Third Stage of Digital Transformation. And I wrote this book because I really wanted to find a concise way to share some of my knowledge around digital strategy and how to get started on a digital transformation journey. So in this book, I cover 3 different sections. I cover the people, process, and technology aspects of transformation, with the idea that it's meant to be a starting point, a launching pad for organizations and team members that are going through digital transformations. So I encourage you to buy this book. You can get it electronically, you can get it paperback, or you can get it in hard copy, as I'm holding here in front of you. You can get it by going to thefinalcountdown.com. You can also search for it on Amazon if you shop at Amazon. Otherwise, just go to thefinalcountdown.com. Love to hear your feedback on this book as well. So I hope you check it out and hope you enjoy.
I'm excited to share our newly released 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report. This free download is available on the Third Stage website at thirdstage-consulting.com. This report is truly packed full of technology-independent and agnostic insights for your project to ensure that you're strategically optimized for success. Download your copy today with the QR code in front of me or visit our website for more details.
These things take time, Mom and Dad, they have a good life. But what am I gonna do with mine?
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 165. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions and sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. We're here playing you a clip from a conference where I recently was on a panel discussion talking about trends in manufacturing and supply chain management. Let's jump back into the conversation.
And I didn't know, Andy, if you wanted to jump in a little
Sure.
bit.
No comments on M&A activity. However, I think all of these trends that we've been talking about really bring up a lot of our growth is happening internally. And so, in fact, here we just received a major award last week that will have us building and controlling all of the underbody structure for both the two biggest OEMs in full-size pickups and SUVs for body-on-frame vehicles. That's going to lead us to we'll be building 3 plants at the same time. Amongst those 3 plants will be 2.4 million square feet. And I don't know that we've ever done 3 at the same time. So both within, outside 4 walls and within 4 walls, I think there's just a lot of excitement and activity and crazy amounts of growth in all these transitions.
Very good. If you want to jump in.
Yeah, I love what David said about the change management piece of it, but I think the example you gave of your ERP guy that was worried about his job, that's the way we should all think about our organizations, is that this technology, as cool as it is, we might all get excited about it here at a conference. We go back to our home offices and try to roll this out to the masses, and people may be on board with it conceptually and say, yeah, this is great. These tool sets can be awesome. It's going to be perfect. It's going to help our business. I get it. I understand why we're doing it. But when it comes time to change me, when you tell me you're taking away my spreadsheet or the way I've done business however long, or the fact that I've thrived in my job through heroics over the years, I've been here forever, and now you're going to automate part of that, I am going to freak out, no matter how well-intentioned I am. Not because I'm a bad person, not because I want to sabotage the project, but because I fear for my own stability and future. So that's the way we have to think about it from a people perspective, especially when you're going through change as it is through M&A integration. People start to panic or get nervous as it is. Then you introduce new technology, you change business processes, you start to standardize. That's just a lot of change for people to consume, and they're going to get nervous. And on the surface, it may look like they're on board and they're supportive, but you have to assume that they are at some point going to freak out, for lack of a better word. And you have to really invest heavily in that change piece of it.
Yeah, very good points. So my last question is, at Epicor, we consider each of you partners, not only in helping you run your business, but in making us better. And I want to thank each of you for spending your time with us to express your thoughts and with our audience, as well as our leaders as they interact with you. What advice do you have for Epicor to ensure our success in the next 3 to 5 years? And remember that my boss is sitting back there somewhere.
I was going to ask, are you sure you want to go there?
Yes, I do. Actually, I do. I'm very interested.
I'll start it. I think keep innovating the technology that we have going, keep building on the product you have, not only from the additional things that are being added to it, but the core. The statement I guess I think of is, keep thinking big and supporting small is kind of the key word that I would throw out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would echo Nick's comments, right? As I look out into the audience, I'm reminded of the strong relationships that we've built with the user groups in our area, both the Western and the Central user groups. And we make stuff, right? We make stuff all day long, every day. And not to not focus on the core technology that is what got Epicor to this point, I think that'd be detrimental. And I'm not saying that that's happening, but certainly making sure that those areas of the product are as equally impacted as some of the recent acquisitions and other data analytics and things like that.
Very good. And you're one of our cab members, so you make sure that we do that too, right?
Correct. Yes, for sure.
So
for sure.
we've got
way to put it back on us.
good on the
That's
board.
good. That's good.
Something good on the stuff. Blame? No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Andy.
Sure. Well, I appreciate the question, and I'd like to comment on, and don't forget about ERP in the next 3 to 5 years. And even though it's not the latest, brightest, and shiny thing, I do need to qualify my next comments so that everybody's aware that I do, in fact, wear CMS embroidered underwear, as may have been evident from my earlier comments. So I think a focus on that ERP system specifically, in light of a lot of the trends and transitions that we're talking about, that's a real, I'd say a diamond in the rough, but it's not really. It's a diamond there, it just needs a little bit more polish and some care and attention, and I think it can really be a big revenue generator for the company.
All right. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I've only got, 8 minutes? Try to cover what I can in that amount of time. Just kidding. But no, I'd say that, starting with the positive, I think that I view Epicor's leadership team as extremely strong. I think it's sort of like a greatest hits of the ERP software industry. They've sort of assembled this all-star super group of executives that are running the company. So my recommendation would be to keep building on that, keep that team around, because about 10 years ago, I'd say ish, I might have the dates wrong, but about a decade ago, Epicor, I'd say, went through a pretty dark time. They've always had a strong product and a strong suite of products, especially in the manufacturing and distribution space, but there is PE, ownership changes, executive changes, and there's some collateral damage, I'd say, that happened a decade ago where I'd say the ecosystem suffered. The VARs and the resellers in the space, it just wasn't robust, and Epicor had scaled back the professional services piece of it. And this is all in the past. I'm not trying to rehash the past, but the executive team now, I think, is doing a good job of correcting that, but there's still more work to do in that space. And then the last thing I'd say, or the third thing I'd suggest as a recommendation, is just to provide more clarity on where different products fit and where they don't. Because I think the beauty of Epicor is they've got this sort of best-of-breed strategy where they've got different systems that fit different situations. They're not trying to be everything to everyone. They're not trying to do a one-size-fits-all strategy, which I think is the right approach, especially in this space. But they could do a better job, I think, in my opinion, on the marketing side, just to be more clear about where those products fit and how they're different from one another.
And Christine, I will also add that yesterday when I got the chance to talk to Steve, and I'll echo what Eric said, since we started using the product, which we bought back in 2015, which is shortly thereafter is I think when the leadership change happened, it's been very good. And I really think that Epicor's focus on us as the customer, right? Whether it's the advisory board that we sit on or the product advisory boards, listening to the customers and getting their feedback, I think that that's really important, and would strongly encourage you to continue to do that.
All right, that was great stuff. I hope you learned a lot in that panel discussion. It was a fun panel discussion for me to do as well. I always love being on the stage or speaking with people that are from industry and have that sort of inside scoop on running supply chain and manufacturing operations themselves. So great stuff there, and hope you enjoyed it as well. So that's it for today's episode. I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you for all the great comments and questions, and we'll have a new episode for you next week. Episode number 166 you can find next week, streaming live to LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also find it by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. If you can't wait that long and you really want to get more digital transformation knowledge, I encourage you to check out all 164 past episodes of this show by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. You can listen or watch wherever you prefer by just going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. So I hope you all have a great week, and we will see you next week on the Transformation Ground Control podcast. Take care.